My father was a Bad River tribal member and a Menominee First Descendant. His spirit name was Nanaweta, which is Menominee for warrior. And he devoted his entire adult life to tribal sovereignty, tribal education, historic preservation, cultural preservation, and repatriation of ancestors. And I lost him when I was 15. And it was very hard because, he taught me to love the planet. He really did. When you lose someone who has fought their whole life and then you see new threats to the environment, it really makes you realize, oh, I can't let this continue. And again, that oil spill will still impact tribal nations first. It will still flow into the reservation. Mm-hmm. There's a very big difference in listening to statistics from a company that wants to do what they want to do and a researcher that just wants to look at the scientific facts. A lot of folks that are just much more brilliant than me that really know about the geology of Wisconsin, the hydrology of Wisconsin are saying, hey, you need to reassess. You need to look at this on a deeper level. You need to do higher quality water testing in Wisconsin, and you need to look at the history of ruptures. For us, this isn't an issue about infrastructure. For us, this is not an issue of prices and economics. It's an issue about public safety, and it's an issue about sovereignty. And with Enbridge, you can really see a stark difference. There is such a monumental difference in caring about public opinion versus public safety. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, this is an issue about public safety. Mm-hmm. If we lose the Great Lakes, folks in Toronto they're gonna struggle just as much as folks in Bad River. And I get it. I'm the daughter of a widowed nurse. Many days we have gone out to the mailbox praying that check is in there. I will never fault a Canadian employee of Enbridge. This is an issue that is much deeper than a personal level. It's an issue of colonialism. It's an issue of corporate greed. But that doesn't mean that we can't work together. It doesn't mean that Canadian individuals cannot or should not be involved in this fight. We need you, because we need folks in Canada that are getting the majority of this crude oil to say, hey, no, you can't do this. You have to stand up for tribal sovereignty. You have to stand up for clean water. And frankly, this is a very scary time to be an activist in the United States, as I'm sure you are seeing from Toronto. Things are very turbulent right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's another reason why we really need your help in Canada. We can't win this fight alone.
Welcome to another episode of the Environment in Canada podcast, a podcast about the environment in Canada by Sierra Club Canada. I'm Jessica Murray, Sierra Club Canada's Line 5 community organizer. I'm a part of a cross-border effort to protect our Great Lakes by decommissioning Line 5. To learn more about Line 5, follow us at Sierra Club Ontario on Instagram or head over to nline5.ca and join the movement to safeguard the largest freshwater source on our planet. You can also connect with me every other week on Zoom, where I co-host a 1-hour community of practice following the work of Joanna Macy, known as The Work That Reconnects, and Vanessa Machado de Oliveira and the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective. Feel free to reach out anytime. Jessica M. at sierraclub.ca. Today, I'm speaking with Gracie Waukechon, who I had the great joy and honor in spending time with when we brought her and Bad River tribal elders Joe Bates and Sandy Duragan to Canada in early 2025. Gracie is a youth activist who is a Menominee descendant as well as a Bad River Band member. And today we check in about Line 5 as the Bad River versus Enbridge case continues in Wisconsin. Gracie shares of her personal story about how she got involved with Line 5, her love of Manoomin and wild rice, and as well updates us on why this court case matters. Before we begin, just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on the homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and on CHMA Radio in Sackville, New Brunswick on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Atlantic Daylight Time. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe so you can get the latest episodes from us. Hello and good morning.
Hoso Bonjour. Good morning, Jessica.
Hey, Gracie. I'm so excited to have a chance to catch up with you. It's been a while since we were together in person for a wee tour up here in so-called Canada, in Toronto and Montreal for the two back-to-back Bad River screenings. So I'm super thrilled to have you back with us again and to catch up and hear what you've been up to. But maybe as a first go around, like, how are you? Do you want to introduce yourself?
For anyone tuning in, my name is Gracie Waukechon. My Menominee name is Mayawe, which means she leads the way. I am a proud member of the Bad River Band, and I am a Menominee descendant. Very grateful to be here today. I've been doing well, back in college. Very grateful to be at the College of Menominee Nation, learning from Indigenous scholars, Indigenous researchers. I will say things have been very challenging right now as this contested court case is underway, and watching this division, it's been a very challenging few weeks to watch this continue to be a very public battle.
Yeah, let's unpack that as we continue along. Some things I want to highlight for our readers. Gracie is 22, so she's a wonderful youth that I'm so glad that I got to meet and work alongside. Where should we start? I feel like it might be important to give our listeners kind of a foundation of just Line 5 basics, because I know that we are in different times, even since that we first met at the earlier this year, but at the very bare bones, I wonder if you want to share kind of like what you think are the foundational pieces for Line 5, noting that Line 5 is like, I think it took me about 6 months to really grapple everything. So yeah, we'll do what we can with this kind of hour-long recording.
Absolutely. Yeah. And and I'm still learning a lot every day, especially being a full-time student. I don't have as much time to be as present in activism as I would like. I do what I can, but so the pretty basic facts about Line 5 for anyone tuning in who has never heard of it before. It is a 645-mile pipeline. Its origins is in Alberta, Canada, in the tar sands of Alberta. It starts in Superior, Michigan. It travels through the Ashland area, through the Bad River Band, into Upper Michigan, down through the Straits of Mackinac, and into Lower Michigan. It then ends in Sarnia in Ontario. And so basically, it's a pipeline that goes from Canada to Canada, right?
US.
And with a shortcut of the United States and tribal land. It was built in 1953, and it was only created to operate for 50 years. It is now over 20 years past this deadline. It has a history of ruptures, at least 33 known ruptures on this 645-mile stretch. And that aside, it is a huge issue when we look at tribal sovereignty. It was created during a very turbulent period for tribal history, where we didn't have a lot of autonomy and we didn't have a lot of options for economic growth on the reservation. It was put in without our consent. That was a decision that lied in the hands of the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And this was created between the United States and Canada, but placed on the Bad River tribal land. And it's been very controversial, not only because of the ruptures, but what this means for our tribal sovereignty, and our wishes for what we do with our land and how we protect it.
I think that's a great brief. I also want to add, because our listeners are often Canadian, that the pipeline is owned by Enbridge, which is a Canadian company, though when we get into multinational corporations, it gets so the boundaries start to get really blurred because a lot of their activities in the United States. And then why, even more so as to the Canadian perspective, is then kind of like, why should Canadians, I mean, and it's, a Canadian pipeline starts in Alberta, ends in Ontario, and continues on into Line 9, all the way through Toronto into Montreal, but also partly why we are concerned in Line 5 Canada and Sierra Club Canada Foundation is also because historically our government has used the 1977 treaty, which was a treaty between the United States and the US that basically put some agreements into place about whether, I think it was kind of like, how do I frame it? It's like giving permission and kind of some sort of protection around a pipeline to be on each other's lands. And so Canada has used this pipeline to say, oh, like we have this treaty and you can't move it because of the treaty, even though many of the treaties with First Nations peoples in the United States with tribal nations predate this 1977 treaty by quite a lot of time. So I just wanted to kind of give that backgrounder for Canadian context as well.
Yes, and I really am glad that you brought up the 77 treaty, because how often in history, at least for the United States, have they ever honored a treaty?
Oh, yeah.
How often have those treaties come about in a way that is ethical, with prior, free, and informed consent?
Mhm.
Why are we all of a sudden just starting to care about treaties and honoring them? That feels kind of strange given uh, how we have navigated working with treaties for many years,
Yeah.
It
When
feels
it's in
weird.
our favor, it seems like is basically when we like to use treaties.
That's when we honor them.
Yeah. Some hard truths there for sure. So I think another piece to help flush out before we get into the court case is that you're a descendant, a Menominee descendant, and also Bad River Band member. Is that right? So it's like you kind of are from both places. And the court case that we're going to be talking about today is specifically to Bad River Band. Is that all correct? And correct me where I'm wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's completely correct. I know that that can be a little confusing. Another important piece of that is I live off of the reservation, just for full transparency. I live closer to the Menominee Reservation. But yeah, I'm kind of walking in those two worlds of two different tribal nations. Something that really matters to me with Line 5 is this is really deeply important for all tribes in the Great Lakes region. And I've really seen that in my family that comes from the Menominee Nation. My mentors, my teachers, uh, they really stand in solidarity with Bad River. So it's really wonderful for me to see these two nations that I am so proud to be a part of, um, both really standing strong together. And another piece that's so important with that relationship between the Menominee and the Bad River is we both have so much cultural emphasis on Manuman, wild rice. And that's something that, we'll probably talk a little bit more about when we get into the actual court case. But the the reason that the Bad River Band and the Ojibwe are in the Great Lakes region is because of a story of coming to the place where food grows on water.
Mhm.
And a huge part of Menominee culture are the word Omatnumanewik, Menominee, means people of the wild rice. Wherever we go, the wild rice follows. So between my Ojibwe culture and my Menominee culture, no matter what, my family has been moving with wild rice,
Mm.
some capacity, since forever.
Mhm.
So that's another reason why it's so critical that we continue to protect the wild rice beds that are just outside the reservation, because we have always relied on that, and it has always been something that we have a relationship with. We have always moved with the rice. We have gone to the rice, and the rice has traveled with us in
Mhm.
some form or another.
That's so beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
during our time that we were together in Toronto and Montreal, Joe Bates, so Bad River Band tribal elder, he gifted me some wild rice from Bad River, and it was just such an honor and to get his recipe and then sharing it when we had Wet'suwet'en and Gidexen and Gidenyao hereditary chiefs and land defenders and youth come, like that was what I served them to eat. So I come from a culture where food and the movement of food and also how food has continued to survive despite human warring and violence and politics. The food and these beings, really, we call it food, but it's like these living beings that have their own life force. Anyways, though, I want to get into this court case. So specifically, we're talking about the court case because there are many court cases, and this is where line five can get quite complex. But specifically, like if you're imagining a map, we are focused on Wisconsin, Bad River, while also naming that there is harm and different tribal nations that are involved at the heart, more of like the heart of the Great Lakes area in like Michigan area. So Sault Ste. Marie, other side there. Bay Mills Indians. There we go. So, Gracie, feel free to take it away in terms of this court case, what's happening.
Yeah. So a few years ago, Judge Connolly ordered Enbridge to get off of the Bad River Reservation, uh, giving them I think it was 3 to 6 years. I never pretend to know everything about this. So please, for all those listening, know I'm a full-time student who is learning about this as much as I can when I can. I will never claim to be the expert, and I encourage everyone listening to this to go do your own research into this project. But the Bad River Band, they won a court case basically saying, hey, you have to stop trespassing on our land, and you are given this amount of time to either decommission the line or reroute. Enbridge decided to challenge that and reroute a 41-mile stretch below the Bad River Reservation. Currently, Line 5 bisects the reservation. Enbridge has been planning the construction of a 41.1-mile stretch underneath the reservation. And on the surface, that looks really awesome, right? Oh, good, we're getting this pipeline off of our land. But it's just going to be another way of worsening a potential oil spill, because this pipeline will be constructed on waterways that flow into the reservation and farther north into Lake Superior.
Mhm.
Um, so the WDNR has been working with Enbridge to get these permits. They've done their research. They say that this is something that is safe for the environment, but the way that this pipeline has to be constructed is incredibly damaging to our wetlands. And our wetlands in Wisconsin are pristine, they are precious, there is nothing like them in the world. And to blast through them for the construction of this new segment is going to be devastating. Um, and again, that oil spill will still impact tribal nations first. It will still flow into the reservation.
Mhm.
So that is why this court case is so contentious and divided, is because yes, it will be off of the reservation, but we will still be the first to be impacted.
Mhm. So have you had a chance, and I know you're a busy student, so it's okay if you haven't, but I'm curious to know, have you had a chance to stay kind of in contact as to what's happening currently in in the litigation? Because it seems like the last few months have been particularly more stressful for you. So I'm
Mhm.
curious to know like what new things are emerging that are causing that stress.
Yeah, so I went to Ashland to partake in public testimony against the Line 5 reroute on August 12th. And what's been giving me this great heartache is hearing Enbridge lawyers, Enbridge supporters talk about how safe and effective this reroute will be and how this will be a wonderful alternative for the people that use propane in Michigan and Wisconsin. But the fact is, it's what Enbridge says. It's not necessarily what outside non-biased researchers are saying. And there's a very big difference in listening to statistics from a company that wants to do what they want to do and a researcher that just wants to look at the scientific facts. The permits that the DNR is partaking in is a part of. A lot of geologists, hydrologists, oceanographers are saying, hey, you have not done enough research. You have not looked at what this will mean when an oil spill happens in these wetlands specifically. Um, a lot of folks that are just much more brilliant than me that really know about the geology of Wisconsin, the hydrology of Wisconsin are saying, hey, you need to reassess. You need to look at this on a deeper level. You need to do higher quality water testing in Wisconsin, and you need to look at the history of ruptures.
Mm-hmm. And do we have a kind of timeline as to when this will conclude, or are we kind of like in the middle of the whole court case now?
I think right now we're in the middle. I know that this is the week that is Enbridge is pleading their case to Judge Foy. So this week in particular is going to be very active. I know that in Madison, they're going to be pleading their case as to why this is safe, why it's effective, why it's necessary, why it's acceptable. I think that the court case will conclude by mid-October.
Okay, so it is, within a month or so.
Mm-hmm.
From the date of this conversation, anyways. Ah,
I believe so, unless things change. And
mhm. I am so sorry, Gracie. Like this is just so heart-wrenching, and I know, um, the pipeline's been there for so long, so it's like this has been a challenge or an issue for the tribal community for such a long time. So,
it really has been. And when you look at all of the things that the Bad River Band has been through since colonization,
mhm.
it's really exhausting that we have to continue to fight for our basic survival. Yeah, I wrote about this. I wrote about this experience on August 12th in op-ed, but there's something that I left out. When I was packing the night before to drive up to Ashland, I couldn't stop crying. And normally, when I am doing any kind of public speaking about Line 5, there's always a little bit of nerves of, am I going to put my foot in my mouth? Am I going to am I going to not have all the facts at my fingertips that I want? But I just could not stop crying because this is such a deeply personal issue.
Mhm.
For me, it is tied in with indescribable grief and loss and love for tribal activists that came before me and great worry for those that will come after me. Um, we really are connected to the land. And for us, this isn't an issue about infrastructure. For us, this is not an issue of prices and economics. It's an issue about public safety, and it's an issue about sovereignty. And with Enbridge, you can really see a stark difference. There is such a monumental difference in caring about public opinion versus public safety.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, this is an issue about public safety.
Yeah.
when we were in Canada, Joe Bates mentioned to me he went deer hunting, I think only mere miles from the pipeline, and he harvested a deer that was full of these awful lesions, all these awful anomalies. We're already seeing the impacts of oil spills that maybe we're not even seeing. Maybe we don't see millions of gallons burst, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some toxic levels of crude oil already seeping into the reservation.
Mm.
So this is just an issue that is so deeply personal, and it's so connected to all of the fights that we have had to be present in to protect our land, to protect our children, to protect our two-spirit and our women relatives. It's just,
Yeah.
I thought of the Sandy Lake tragedy. I thought of the Walleye Wars. I thought of the 1996 blockade, the train blockade. I thought of all these instances of awful things that we have had to deal with as a people. And why do we have to keep facing them?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. What comes up when I listen to it is like it's almost like in facing hardship, you almost have to become, something that you almost maybe don't even want to be, like when do you get to rest and be soft and gentle and, you know, and not be fighting, right? And be having that hardcore, skin to be able to withstand and keep meeting it. So, yeah.
Exactly. When can we just breathe easy and enjoy nature and not look at it and think, God, I hope I don't lose you. I'm really scared. When I look at Lake Superior, when I look at our beautiful forests and our beautiful wetlands, and I work with wild rice with the Sustainable Development Institute, and knowing what a fragile but sacred relative that is, just looking at it's like, I really hope I'm not going to lose you,
Mm.
you
Yeah,
know?
I feel that. I really feel that with you. You also mentioned how deeply personal this is. You named the blockade, and I know you've shared the story about your father being at the blockade, and I wonder because I know that his your relationship with him has really inspired or moved you to be involved in these spaces. So I'm curious if you want to share with our listeners that story at all.
Yeah, I'd really love to. So, and I'll try not to cry. Yeah, my father was a Bad River tribal member and a Menominee First Descendant. His spirit name was Nanaweta, which is Menominee for warrior. And he devoted his entire adult life to tribal sovereignty, tribal education, historic preservation, cultural preservation, and repatriation of ancestors. And I lost him when I was 15. And it was very hard because, he taught me to love the planet. He really did. And he told me he was a very humble man. He really didn't talk about a lot of the stuff he did in a way where he was bragging. I'd find out years later, as I'm sure a lot of dads do. They just drop awesome lore like years later. And it's like, why am I just hearing about this now? But he told me about that train blockade and that he was scared. You don't know what's coming, but he knew he had to do that to protect his children. And at that point, he wasn't even a father. My parents were going to be married a month later
Why were they blocking the train?
because a mining company was trying to bring sulfuric acid onto the reservation, and environmentalists, tribal activists, they just knew this is going to derail and this is going to spill onto our land. And they held firm and they stood their ground and they stopped that. They placed their bodies in the way of environmental degradation. And yeah, when you lose someone who has fought their whole life, and then you see new threats to the environment, it really makes you realize, oh, I can't let this continue.
Mm-hmm.
That how could I possibly honor my father and not do something to help. I remember one of the last conversations we had was about the Back 40 mine, which was an open pit sulfuric mine that was going to threaten the Menominee River in Michigan. Uh, another really sacred place in Upper Michigan being threatened uh, by fossil fuels, by extraction, by colonialism. And yeah, it's just my love for him is directly tied with my love for the planet and for the reservations that we spent time walking in the woods in and turkey hunting in. So yeah, it's hard to even find the words. It's hard to even articulate it. But yeah, I thought that my first solo trip, because it's a 4-hour drive from where I live to the Bad River Reservation, I thought that my first solo trip home would be to spread his ashes and to go to the train tracks and just sort of take in that history and appreciate Lake Superior and reconnect with those roots, because it's really hard to get up to the reservation for me. So I thought that would be kind of a final step in my grief. And turns out, no, my first time going back to the reservation as an adult was to try to protect it. And in the way that grief as tribal people is intergenerational, so can activism can be intergenerational too. We look at things in a 7th generation perspective. We look 3 generations back and we look 3 generations ahead. And 3 generations ago, my great grandmother was in the boarding school. She was in boarding schools and had lost all cultural severance. She lost her cultural ties. And then my father brought it back into our family along with environmental activism. And when he died, I thought that was severed, but you really have to pick that up and you have to keep fighting those battles that your elders did, because they, how can I possibly return him to the earth if it's about to be destroyed? How can I possibly spread his ashes in Lake Superior if we're about to have a tragic oil spill there? It's hard to articulate, but yeah, the reason why I do this is because of my dad. I can't possibly let this reservation that he protected have this tragic oil spill. I have to do what I can to stop it.
Yeah, I think you articulated that very beautifully. And I know your dad is really proud of you.
Thank you. I try.
Yeah. I recently saw, I mean, I think this quote's been around for quite some time, or like t-shirts and that kind of thing, but the sentiment that like I am my ancestors' wildest dream.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Or I'm what my ancestors prayed for.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when we all kind of, because we all, at the end of the day, belong to this planet. We belong to some land somewhere, whether we remember it, whether we're severed from those cultural ties or not. Like, that's the truth of it, because we're not, this is where this is home, this is it. You're not from somewhere else. And so it's like, yeah, to live in this way, to be really connected to what were your ancestors fighting for? What did they yearn for? You know, what did they want for you?
Yeah.
What was their unfinished business? And I've started to think about my own life as kind of, I'm their wildest dream, but I'm also like the tender of their unfinished business.
Yes.
And that's a
Absolutely.
mixed bag, there's a lot of different things going on in there. And yeah, I'm always curious to share these sorts of ideas so that more people can reclaim their own sense of deep connection to land and place and generational storytelling. Because we can be living myths. We are storying ourselves in every single moment.
Yeah. And I'm sure as a mother too, that must add another layer for you, because you want your children to have the best possible version of Mother Earth.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that this is something that we can really find cross-culturally, is just this idea of preparing a place for your children. I'm not a Christian. My comfort that I take in spirituality is mostly with Ojibwe and Menominee teachings, but there is one Bible passage that I do really enjoy. It's I go to prepare a place for you. And I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
And like I said, even with my dad, he wasn't even a father yet. He wasn't even married yet, but he thought about this is going to impact my children. And I don't even know if I will have children because the planet might not be suitable for them, which is really, really sad that that's how some folks have to think. But yeah, I think that idea of connecting to our Indigenous homelands, it's something that we do for ourselves, but it's also something we do for our relatives who were displaced. And it's something we do to make sure that we preserve it for our children.
Yeah.
It's really just holistic.
And for sure, I definitely got like I've always loved and felt very deeply connected to the woods and the waters, but it's definitely when I had kids that something else woke up, like the second at least for myself, like for me, like becoming a mother really made it so crystal clear that I was part of this larger river of time and that I had to, take those steps to becoming a good elder and becoming
Yeah.
somebody that could leave something for my kids. So yes, yes, absolutely. Like seeing yourself as a continuation and seeing yourself going forwards is definitely alive and why I do what I do as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle us back to why you reached out because I am always so fond when we get to connect, and I have such fond memories of being in Montreal with you and staying up late and listening to music while we worked on those banners. Like, it was such a good time, and to hear your laugh and smiles, so wonderful. But you reached out, and specifically when you shared with me your op-ed, you were saying that you were seeking out Canadian outlets, and I want to, like really just give space to the fact that you are not only a tribal descendant, you are also living in a very scary space right now. And I'm curious if you want to share, I don't know, more of to kind of like what's happening there and what the experience is like, because it sounds like there's been some real like on the ground grassroots experiences of what's happening.
Yeah. So first of all, I want you to know that I think about that trip to Canada like literally every day. It was so
Aw.
amazing. And I just it was so wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you gave me that opportunity. It genuinely changed my life. Um, and yeah, as a tribal member, watching all of this play out, Enbridge is a Canadian owned company. So it can really probably look like this is an issue of Bad River versus Canada, but it's not, because we care about protecting the water for everybody. We care about protecting the water for folks in Toronto and Montreal and Sault Ste. Marie. This is an issue that is about every single living creature that relies on the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes is over 20% of the world's freshwater resource. So the reason why I wanted to reach out, and I'm so grateful that you're giving me this space to speak, is because yes, we are challenging this Canadian company, but it's because of a great love for all human beings and
Yeah.
all relatives who rely on water. And this is a fight that we will win if we are all working together.
Mhm.
And it requires cross boundary solidarity. It requires um, organizing in tribal communities, in big cities and small towns in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Canada. Um, this is something that I think every human being needs to know about because it will impact them. If we lose the Great Lakes, folks in Toronto they're gonna struggle just as much as folks in Bad River. So yeah, that's my reason why I want to reach out to Canadian outlets, to Canadian individuals, is because this is an issue between a tribal community and a Canadian company, it doesn't mean that we harbor ill will towards Canada. It doesn't mean we harbor ill will towards individuals who just want to keep their job on construction. Something that we saw the at the court case was a lot of individuals coming forward and wanting to keep their jobs at Enbridge and talking about their fear of if they lose their job because they were promised a job working on the pipeline. And I get it. I'm the daughter of a widowed nurse. many days we have gone out to the mailbox praying that check is in there. I will never fault a Canadian employee of Enbridge. This is an issue that is much deeper than a personal level. It's an issue of colonialism. It's an issue of corporate greed. But that doesn't mean that we can't work together. It doesn't mean that Canadian individuals cannot or should not be involved in this fight. We need you, because we need folks in Canada that are getting the majority of this crude oil to say, hey, no, you can't do this. You have to stand up for tribal sovereignty. You have to stand up for clean water. And frankly, this is a very scary time to be an activist in the United States, as I'm sure you are seeing from Toronto. Things are very turbulent right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's another reason why we really need your help in Canada. We can't win this fight alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whenever I actually just got off the call with Danny, who's out Water Watchers, and we kind of tend the Line 5 Canada space together. Mm-hmm. Story that we both feel really resonant towards is like, we are all people of the Great Lakes, and we are all coming, to protect the Great Lakes. It's and now I think of like our comrades over in Montreal, le vivant se défend, so life defends itself. Mm-hmm. And John Seed, who I think he was Australian, but when asked kind of like, where do you like source your energy from? And he said something along the lines of like, I am not John Seed protecting the forest. I am the forest that has awakened through this human called John Seed who is defending itself. And so I kind of really see the same thing that needs to happen for the Great Lakes, and that it is happening in this like very widespread, cross-border, decentralized kind of way. And it's been a beautiful experience to all be working towards that.
So. Absolutely. And that's such a beautiful way to look at oneself and one's place in the environment. We are all an extension of the natural world. Yeah. Every single one of us, whether we live in a metropolitan area or not, we are all an extension of the natural world. And I think about that day in Montreal, and after the screening, I got to speak to a lot of wonderful folks that came, and I was really scared. I was like, how are they going to feel? Here comes these folks from the States saying, you need to change your oil company. Like I thought, oh man, I wonder how they're going to feel. And I remember speaking to one young man, and I said, oh, thank you so much for coming. Like, what brought you here? And he said, I care about the rocks and the birds and the plants and the insects. Mm-hmm. So I think that also when we look at Line 5, we can't just look at how is this going to impact me as a person. We have to look at how is this going to impact every single living creature. A lot of tribal nations have words for all my relatives or everybody. For the Menominee, it's Natanawe Makanak, which means all of my relations. And that doesn't just extend to your blood family, it extends to every single living being on the planet. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that everyone should really think about, because it's, in order to really fight for the earth, you have to love the earth. And in order to love the earth, you have to know that you're just an extension of it. Mm-hmm. You're just a different looking root from a tree.
Yeah, or like a tentacle, of an octopus, because I think that octopi are quite fascinating in the way that every single arm almost has its own mind. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of, I like to think of it that way as well too. Yeah. So part of the work is to like almost help people to awaken to this reality in a felt sense of like, oh my goodness, like what am I doing? Like how could I not protect this? It's mm-hmm. Because you live such a richer, more connected life as well. Mm-hmm. Rather than being like, oh, here's like little old me doing things in my separate way over here all alone. Yeah. Moving in concert with all of the beings that want to live and still want to live despite all of this that has happened is so much more powerful.
Absolutely. And, it's going to, a spill on Line 5 is going to impact every living creature, and something else we saw was a lot of supporters of Enbridge talking about, well, what's going to happen to our farmers if we don't have Line 5? Mm-hmm. But my question is, what are we going to do if we have it? Yeah. The major components of crude oil are very toxic to cattle. Plants cannot germinate. They cannot get the oxygen they need. They cannot photosynthesize if they are drowning in crude oil. You know, if we only look at this from an agricultural standpoint, from an economic standpoint, if we look at this and how the commerce of coastal cities in Wisconsin, and there are a lot of them, you know, we are all going to suffer. It's not just Bad River. This is an issue that's going to impact all of us. Nothing can survive a tragic oil spill.
Yeah. Well, it's been so nice catching up with you. We're getting close to our time, and I'm wondering for any last thoughts. I'm curious actually, because at the end of the Bad River film, it's so beautiful the way they end it. It's kind of like I think the Bad River Band tribal the members must have been asked something along the lines of like, "What do you want to say to your future descendants?" And I'm curious to know. I guess you can go either way in time, like whether you have something you want to say to your ancestors or something that you'd love to say to your future descendants. But yeah, I'm curious to know what that would be.
Oh, wow, that's so powerful. Yeah, and you know, when I saw that, that was my first time actually being able to sit down and watch the movie. And oh my God, I cried so hard. It was such a beautiful moment. I just sat there and wept. But um, yeah, if I could say anything to my ancestors, I guess would be, you know, Ketapenin, it is you that I love. I hope that I've made you proud. I'm living in a very different world from you, but I still am doing everything I can to preserve what you've left for me. And if I could say anything to my descendants, just I love you and I hope that we leave something beautiful for you. I hope that you can go and you can pick up your ricing sticks and you can go and you can rice on the Menominee Reservation. I hope that you can rice on Lake Superior. There's going to be a lot of wolf spiders in that wild rice, so don't wear sandals. But yeah, I really hope that the love that I have for the people who came before me and the people who will come after me, I hope that my love for them is strong enough to really protect the planet that they're going to inherit.
Mm, I do think it's going to be love that shifts anything.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing this time with me, Gracie. It's been really lovely to reconnect and catch up with you. And I love your new short hairdo. I'm glad.
Thank you. It's when I wake up in the morning, I look like Pat Nixon. It's it's really when I wake up in the morning, it's giving 1960s. Um, but thank you. I'm glad you like it. I'm trying to grow it out, but yeah, it's been wonderful to reconnect. And I seriously, oh my God, I think about that trip to Canada often, and I was so grateful to meet all those wonderful people who are just standing in solidarity with us. You know, again, that love transcends tribal identity. It transcends blood quantum. It transcends your citizenship, your, you know, your color, your race, your sexuality. Like at the end of the day, we all need each other and we all need to protect each other. So that was just such a wonderful experience to come to Canada and be a part of that. And I can't thank you enough. I'm seriously like I'm forever grateful for that.
Honor to have you join us, truly. Thanks so much, and I wish you so well with all your studies and all the next steps, and do keep us updated with all things Line 5, and fingers crossed, hopefully in a month we'll be celebrating, and yeah.
I hope so. Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, to everyone listening, you know, please learn more. Please learn what you can do to stop Line 5. And very grateful for Clean Wisconsin, a Bad River Band, you know, these folks that are standing up and protecting the tribe. So yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. It's been wonderful to chat with you.
And for our Canadians listening, it's nline5.ca. So the 5 is just the number. And there's always an action toolkit there that you can take on board. And we're always revisiting what our strategy is in terms of who we're focusing on targeting. And so it's a great place to stay connected and really supporting just to, like, God forbid, can we please get off of fossil fuels and just transition and all the things that we would like?
Right?
Yeah, please. All right. Well, thanks so much again.
Yes, thank you.
Just a reminder that you can take action on environmental issues by visiting sierraclub.ca. We have tons of petitions, other actions and events, and regular news updates you can sign up for on our homepage. You can also find Sierra Club Canada on social media, and you can listen to the Environment in Canada podcast on the Harbinger Media Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts. This podcast also airs on CKUT Broadcast Radio in Montreal, 90.3 FM, bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and on CHMA Radio in Sackville, New Brunswick, on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Atlantic Daytime. Don't forget to click follow or subscribe so you get the latest episodes from us.